Hello my friends and welcome back to the workshop. I'm Jeff. Now today we have a relatively simple project. What's been going on here is I have these benches that are from the kitchen table and the dining room, and these pads on the bottom here, see how this one gets kind of, it gets off center, it gets full of junk and gunk, and they just need to be replaced occasionally. So I've got some replacement pads. Now you'll see on some of these I sort of pieced together little pieces of pads back the last time I did this, and this time I actually took the time, got on Amazon, got the right size. Highly recommend it. We're going to get a much better result using the right product. One thing that is a question on this is what's the right method to get these old pads off? This is really the trick. Sticking on a new pad doesn't really take a whole lot of effort. It's getting the old pad off and getting the leg clean so we get a good adhesive surface so that pad will stay on there for years and protect your floor. So let's take a look at the different tools we're going to try to use in order to get these old pads off, and specifically the adhesive that's going to be a little bit resistant to coming off. Okay, so I came up with with three different options here. The first one, we're going to use the old heat gun and putty knife and get the adhesive loosened up with the heat and then scrape it off and be done with it. The next option is to simply sand it. Now, this is a tool I acquired recently, and I've enjoyed it for an oscillating tool for various types of tasks. So we've got a little attachment here for sanding, and we've got some sandpaper pads specially made to fit on this, so we're going to give that a try and see how sanding it will get the adhesive off. And then we got the old standby with the random orbital sander. I've got a 80 grit pad here that we're going to give a shot to, and I think this is my theory, is I think this sander is going to work much better than this one, but it does seem overkill with a sanding pad this big. Okay, so let's give this first method a try. I'm going to heat the pad, I'm going to scrape it off, and then I'm going to continue to heat and try to get the adhesive off. Either way, once I get the adhesive off, I am going to need to rough up the bottom of this leg with the sanders in order to get a good surface to stick, I want to say glue, but we're going to stick the new pads to. But I think this may help this process a lot quicker and spend less time sanding. All right, here we go. Okay, that worked fairly well. The heat gun softened up that adhesive, got it kind of gummy, left a little bit of mess on my putty knife. That of course comes off once it cools and solidifies again, comes off easily. But now I've got a relatively adhesive-free bottom here that we can then sand and get nice and smooth and clean. I'm going to keep working on the rest of these with the same method. Okay, so we've got the 4 pads off of this bench, and what did we learn? Well, we learned a couple things. One is that, as you may have noticed, on the high setting of this gun, there are 2 settings, it's got a high and a low. On the high setting, because these are felt pads that were on here, it had a tendency to start to light up. They would light up and they'd start to smolder a little bit. Never a good thing in a wood shop full of sawdust. So I found that the lower setting would keep the felt from igniting, but it still was warm enough to loosen the adhesive. Now, I'm feeling these, and there's still a stickiness to them. So we're still going to need to sand these like we thought in order to get them ready for sticking on the new pads. Now, let's grab another bench and try using straight sanding on that without the heat. So now we have our second bench, and we're going to skip the heat gun this time. we'll scrape off the pad with the putty knife, and then we're going to use our oscillating tool with this sanding pad and try to sand off the adhesive and get down to the bare wood for our new pads. But right off the bat, I see this layer of adhesive, and you see that right there? It's not going to create a good sticking surface for the new pad. So let's try to sand that off. We'll try this on setting 1 first. Okay, so we made a pretty good dent in that adhesive and have started to get down to the bare wood, remove some of that stain that's on the top. The drawback is we've gummed up this sanding pad pretty good. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through all of these with this pad, but let's give it a go on the next leg and see how this goes. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now our sandpaper has got a good coating of stuff in there, and I'm not quite sure it's going to power through these next two. Let's give it a shot. Okay, I'm going to change the pad out on this one. Okay, so there we go. We got this pad fairly gunked up again on this new one I just replaced. And to tell you the truth, I'm getting a little shaky with all that vibrating from that tool. So I'm going to hold off on this last one. We're going to try our third method using the random orbital sander on our third bench. So let me get that set up next. So let's try the third method. We're going to start with the putty knife again to remove the bulk of the pad, and then we're going to jump to the random orbital sander. And this I consider kind of the old standby. This is the go-to sanding tool for most projects. At least part of the project you're going to be using this tool. And for this job, because we're just trying to rough this up and make a good surface for sticking the new pads to, I'm using 80 grit sandpaper. So let's give this one a shot and see how it works and how I like it. That one is stuck pretty well. Okay, that is not getting the adhesive off. It's still sticky right there, which of course I know you're thinking, well, Jeff, if it's sticky, that'll help the new pad stick on, right? Maybe, but I'd really rather get down to bare wood and get that adhesive of the new pad onto a nice clean surface. I'm going to keep going with this. Okay, it is still sticky. This does not seem to be working. What's kind of curious about this is that the second bench, the second one, when I took the pads off, there was a white section of it. That adhesive was white, whereas these pads are more like the first bench that we used the heat gun on. And I'm wondering if I actually had different pads on the bottom of these legs from the last times I changed them out. So I'm going to regroup and we're going to try something else. Okay, so let's try this. I went and rummaged around a bit and I found this in the garage is goo gone, automotive, but hey, if it gets off the goo, let's give it a shot. So I'm going to spray this on the leg, and the directions say to wait a minute or two so that it starts to break down the goo. So let's give that a minute to set up and work on that adhesive. Hey, while we're waiting for this goo gun to set up on this adhesive, let me tell you a little bit about these benches. Years ago, I built a series of tables, and I was experimenting with the construction technique. And I started out using pocket screws, which are great for a lot of different applications. And I built some tables using pocket screws to put the aprons, hold the legs in on the apron, and I thought this was working pretty well. But there's a little inkling in the back of my head that says, you know, I'm not quite sure that method is going to have the legs, it's going to have the longevity and be able to hold the furniture together long term. So when I built these benches, which I built for my own family, I went back to a tried and true method of using these table leg brackets in the corner. And if you can check these out here, these are very stout, and they're a little overbuilt, but you've got a metal bracket here that ties into both sides of the apron with a little lip, and then I got two hanger bolts on here. And there are 100 different varieties of these, but this allows you to have two bolts in here. Now these bolts can be tightened periodically, and they bring and draw everything together. And the other key that these provide is the ability to remove these legs if you're going to move or need to pack this bench up. You can take these off, put the legs right here in the kind of the little pocket of the bench, and have a nice neat package for moving. It also is much more pronounced when you're dealing with the table. Well, what did I find? I've had these benches now going on about 15 years, and even through a number of children and various types of usage, these legs are still extremely stiff and solid, and I haven't had any problems with either the benches or the table. Okay, let's get back to removing this adhesive. So now that we've got this set up, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the putty knife, see if I can get this adhesive to kind of gum up. Yeah, now take a look at that. You've got the adhesive that's sort of it's kind of going all into one little clump there and coming right off. Then I can get that right off with the cloth. And okay, so that's working a lot better. That feels a lot better. Then from here, now that we've got that adhesive layer off, we can go ahead and hit it with the sander and get that surface all clean and ready to go. So I'm going to use this method and do the rest of these legs on this bench. So I'm going to start with the putty knife to get the felt pad off. Then we're going to put some goo remover on the adhesive. And then while that is setting up, I'll move to the other two legs. I don't know how many times over the years I've replaced these pads, but it seems to need it every couple of years. And it probably has to do with a little bit of my paranoia that I simply want to keep the floor scratch free. And so far, I've been successful at that. What happens sometimes with these is little grit, maybe you want to call it, will get embedded in this felt, and then that slides around on the floor. Not a good result. Let's get a little glue on that one. And this last one off. Great. We will let that set up for a few minutes and scrape off that adhesive once it's been loosened. Okay, now we have the adhesive removed from all four legs on this bench. I'm going to hit it with the sander to get a nice clean surface before we stick the new pads on. There we go. We've got all four of these legs cleaned up and ready to go. Let's grab our new pads and get this thing finished. Okay, I got the new pads, and this is going to look insanely simple after all of that work. We're just pressing those on there. Now this bench will be ready for a few more years. I don't actually keep track. I don't know how many years it's been. I just know it's been long enough that I can't remember the last time I did this. So there we go. This one is ready to get back to the dining room and get back to eating. So what did we learn today? We went through a couple of methods and even added something I wasn't anticipating using. Let me tell you my opinions from having done the work and what I think I would do next time. The heat gun was effective. It did loosen the adhesive, but it brought along with it some baggage in the potential fire hazard from the felt burning, and it just created a lot of extra heat and I don't know, kind of some stickiness to everything. So while it worked and removed the adhesives, I'm not sure I would use this again for this application. So that one goes over here. Now, this is difficult because this is a new tool, and as far as an oscillating tool, for years I had a working tool that wasn't of the best quality because this wasn't really a tool that I've ever really considered a real honest to goodness woodworking tool. But there's always some little thing you need it for. So I had it around, it had a place in my shop, but then recently I had a bigger task that needed to get done, and I invested in this DeWalt tool that runs on the same battery series that I have for my other tools, and I actually fell in love with this tool. I found this tool to be much easier to use, did a much better job, and it had much more controllability over the prior one. And I was really hoping this was going to be the answer. I've also, over the years, I've accepted the batteries and have enjoyed working with battery tools as opposed to the corded. This actually is the next one that is going to be replaced with a battery powered one when we get to that point. But the reality of this tool for this application is it really did not measure up. The pads gummed up very quickly for what I was trying to do, and I also find it a little awkward to apply pressure here. You saw me pushing down on the pad, which is fine, there's nothing here that can hurt you, but it is an awkward way to apply pressure to the sanding process, and it just didn't feel like I was using the right tool. Now, forgive me, this was not intended to be a tool review video, but in using this tool for this application, I did want to say that. So there you go. I'm keeping this, but I won't use it for this task again. So then we're left with the old standby, the putty knife, and then what we learned in the process was the adhesive remover. That was really the key to this process of getting that old junk off of the bottom of the legs so we can put the new pads on there. So the process was scrape off the old felt pad, spray this, wait a couple of minutes. I found if I tried to rush it, because sometimes I get a little impatient, want to get the thing done, but waiting a few minutes to let this work really helped. Then scraping off the adhesive and then hitting with the sander to get the other residue and anything else that's left on the bottom of that leg removed, so we have a nice clean surface to stick the new pad to. So this one's ready to go. I'm going to finish the other two, get those back in the dining room, and we're all set on this one. Now, you go out and build something.